Hi.
Oh, hello, everyone.
You see the messages popping up, but that's so nice
So
to see.
cool.
Really, really happy that you guys are joining us today.
Okay, good.
Good, good. Okay, everybody can hear us and everybody can see us. All right. Excellent, excellent. So let's start. First of all, let me welcome everybody here to our relaunched monthly webinars for Novakid teachers. Thank you so much again for joining us today. I'm really excited that you are all here, and we have a very interesting topic to cover today, which is adapting to the student's age, pace, and level. I would like to give you some information about the technical part of our webinar. Since we are live streaming our webinar on YouTube, you will be able, as you can see, to leave your comments and questions in the chat box. However, we are going to be expecting a short delay, but do not worry, we will keep track of all of your questions and all of your comments and all of your nice words, especially. And should any questions be left unanswered, we will definitely follow up on them in the upcoming post on teacher development section of our teacher portal. You will also be able to watch the webinar in the recording. We will post it on the teacher portal as well. So, and you will also be able to download some handouts with very helpful information, hopefully very helpful information from today's session. Without further ado, let me introduce our fantastic host for today, our speaker, Brittany Gabriel, who has been a teacher at Novakid for over a year now, and she has extensive experience teaching English as a second language, as well as experience in teacher training. Hi, Brittany. I'm really happy to see you.
Hi, Elena. Thank you for inviting me to present this webinar. As Elena said, my name is Brittany, and I have been teaching here at Novakid for just over a year now, but I've been teaching ESL for about 11 years now, between in-person and online. And for the last 4 or 5 years now, I've been doing a lot of different teacher training workshops. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. And I'm going to share our presentation for today. Elena, I need permission.
Just a second. There we go.
Okay, perfect. So here you can see our presentation for today. Our topic is adapting to the student's age, pace, and level, why we should do it, and how we do it here at Novakid. So let's take a look first at our agenda for today. Before we can focus on how to adapt to the student's age, pace, and level, it's important to look at why. So first, why is it important? Then we'll look at some different ways of adapting to the age of the student, then the pace and level of the student. We'll look at what happens when the age and the level of the student doesn't quite align with how you're expecting. And we'll look at some practical case studies of real students here at Novakid. Finally, at the end, we'll gather all of your questions throughout the webinar and answer them in a question and answer period. Before we begin, we're going to take a short quiz about your knowledge here at Novakid and our curriculum. I'm going to turn it back over to Elena to explain how the quiz will work.
Yes, hi again, everyone. I hope that you are excited for this quiz. I am going to share my screen right now, and you should be able to see the QR code that Brittany mentioned. The QR code that you can scan with your phone will take you to the website, menti.com, where you will be able to access the questions from the quiz. Okay, excellent. I see that you guys can see it on the screen. If you, for some reason, cannot access the QR code, you can follow the link. The link will be pinned in the message in the chat box on YouTube with the passcode that you might need to enter to access the quiz. And so I'm very excited for our first question. You should be able to see it on your screen in a few seconds. And Let's see. I see some participants are joining. Very, very exciting. You can see you've got really cool emojis. Okay, so we're ready. The first question. Very easy. What age groups are the speaking courses at Novakid aimed at? You have 40 seconds to answer the question. I hope that we will get a lot of correct answers, but do not worry if you miss this one. Okay, we'll see. So which category is that? 6-year-old plus, 8-year-old plus, or above 10 years old? We have a few more seconds. Well, you have a few more seconds to submit your answers. You see, we have a lot of fast finishes here, and we're almost ready to see the result. Interesting. Brittany, I'm not sure if you can see the result.
I can.
So quite a few of our teachers believe that speaking courses are aimed at 10 years old and above students, which is correct. This answer is correct. As you know, our speaking courses require some certain skills that students must have developed by this age, and the complexity of the content fits this particular age group.
It is possible that some teachers selected the wrong answers because they feel that all classes at Novakid are speaking courses, because we do use only English during our classes. So technically, yes, all of our classes are speaking courses, but here at Novakid, we do have specific speaking courses for our oldest students.
Correct, yes. I hope we all know that we were talking about Time to Talk course and Virtual Explorer. So this was a tricky one. Let's see how well you can manage the second question, and you guys should be able to see them on your screens right about now. Let's see. So this question should appear on the screen by now. What level corresponds to the age group of 6 to 7-year-olds here at Novakid? You already have 25 seconds left. So what would it be? Level 2, level 0, or level 1? Okay, I see the answers are coming in slowly but surely. We are about to see the results. Do not worry if your answer is incorrect. Must be hard answering under pressure of the countdown. I see. So the majority got it right. Yes, that is correct. Students of 6 to 7 years old usually are allocated level 1. It was specifically designed for kids this age category. I see somebody answered level 2. Brittany, what do you think? Is that possible?
Of course, it's possible. There are a couple ways that you could have a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old in level 2. Now, in order to start at level 2, a student must be able to read and blend sounds already. These can be short sounds and words, but they must have the letter recognition necessary. Another possibility is the student started at level 1, and they've already completed level 1 before turning 8 or 9 or 7 years old. So there are a couple ways or reasons why you might have a 6-year-old in level 2. And that's perfectly fine if they can adapt and they can be successful in the lesson.
Excellent. Thank you very much for clarification, Brittany. And I think all of us are ready for the last question. It's very exciting. It has a picture in it, and it will check the knowledge of our curriculum. Let's see. You should be able to see the question on your phone screen right about now. What level and unit is this particular slide taken from? Let's see. Some answers are already coming in.
I think this might be the most difficult question.
I agree. Again, guys, do not worry if you get it wrong. We totally understand that you might not even had a chance yet to teach particular classes, because you never know. But let's see if you can guess whether it belongs to level 2, unit 7, level 4, unit 2, or level 3, unit 3. Everyone has voted. Yay! We got the majority right. Excellent. Yes, this slide was taken from unit 3 of level 3. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, guys, for your participation. I'm really glad to see that you're so active. And now I'm going to give it back to Brittany. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll continue our presentation.
All right. Thank you, Elena. So let's look. Before we can learn how to adapt to the student's age or level or pace, we should first look at why. Why should we even do it? Well, we all know that at Novakid, we have the most amazing teachers who are qualified, prepared, and genuinely want to help their students succeed. It doesn't hurt that Novakid has a great curriculum that also includes a lot of interactive lessons for our students. When parents come to Novakid, they're expecting one-on-one lessons with an individual approach. Now, we all know there's no recipe for a perfect class. It's up to us to find the balance between the material and the ability. We want our students to have a comfortable and unique experience while in class with us at Novakid. Let's look at 3 different ways we can adapt our lessons. We can adapt again to the student's age. We can adapt to the student's level, or we can adapt to the student's pace. How are they perceiving the information? And are they really learning it? Now, before we talk about how we adapt to the different ages, let's take a quick poll to see which age groups are most challenging. Think of your own experience. Do you find it most difficult to teach 4- and 5-year-olds? Perhaps you find it most difficult to teach 10 or older. Maybe you find it most difficult to teach 6 to 9-year-olds. Choose your answer in the poll and write a comment about which level you find most difficult to teach. If you'd like, you can even offer an anecdote for how you deal with these types of students.
Cool. Now we are waiting for your responses. Brittany, what do you personally think is the most challenging age group to teach?
I think all age groups have their challenges. It's definitely more difficult to teach a complete beginner at level 4 than it is to teach maybe a student who has some knowledge at level 4. Or sorry, at age 4. It's more difficult to teach a student who is 4 who is a complete beginner than it is to teach a student who maybe has some knowledge at the age of 4. At the same time, it can be difficult to teach levels 3 and 4 to our 10-year-old students or our 11-year-old students when maybe the content doesn't feel like it relates personally to their lives.
I agree. Let's have a look what our teachers think as well. Have we got the results?
I don't think so, not quite yet. Let's keep looking.
Oh, there we go. 75% voted 4 to 5-year-olds.
Okay. Oh, someone wrote 3-year-olds. Now, we don't generally start classes at the age of 3 unless a student is about to turn 4. So yes, you might have a 3-year-old in one of your classes, but this is not something that is super common here at Novakid. But I agree, they can be a little bit difficult. They can't focus yet. This is true. Sometimes it's really difficult to keep your 3-year-olds engaged during class, but we'll look at some adaptations in our coming slides. All right, let's look at now some different characteristics of these students. Here you can see a beautiful caterpillar with different circles that are describing characteristics of different students according to their age. Now, children have different cognitive stages, which affects their learning and their perceived information. Take a look at these different circles and decide which circle do you think corresponds to 4 and 5-year-old students. Do they imitate adult speech? Are they sociable? Are they competitive? Are they interested in the world? Or do they have a basic understanding of the world? Try to put the circles in order from youngest to oldest. For example, maybe you think the order should be A, D, C, E, B. Put the letters in order in the chat. Now, it should not come as a surprise that children, our youngest students, love singing songs and chanting, whereas some of our older students prefer content that they can relate to their own lives. I'm going to give you a couple moments now to read through the different options and put them in order for what you think our youngest students are like compared to our older students. Okay.
Okay, let's see. You guys can put the correct order of the letters in the chat.
Oh, A, E, B, D, C. Okay. Ooh, okay. A, E, B. Okay, a lot of good ideas. A lot of people seem to be getting the very first, our youngest learners, correct. We'll give it another couple seconds before we look at the correct answers together. A, E, B, D, C, well done. Okay, let's take a look at the correct answers together. Let's start with our youngest students. These are the students who are 4 and 5 years old. These students imitate adult speech. They're very focused on listen and do tasks, and they need a lot of movement during class because naturally their attention span, as many of you have mentioned, is a lot lower. When students are 6 and 7, they seem to have a basic understanding of the world. They like role-playing games, and magical thinking is a big part of their learning. This is why we've changed our level 1 classes to include the Magic Academy. In ages 8 and 9, we have competitive students. They want to get things right. They can learn independently, but they also want opportunities to problem solve and negotiate with their peers. As we get into our older students at 10 and 11, they are more sociable. They start analyzing information and can differentiate between the present, the past, and the future, but they still need positive reinforcement. Finally, our oldest students who are 12 or older, they're interested in the world and they have constantly changing interests. What they like one day might not be the same as when you have class with them again. They might not admit it, but they still really enjoy playing games. And let's face it, I love playing games too. I want my classes to be fun and exciting. Let's take a look at how to adapt based on these characteristics that we've just looked at to the ages of different students. Let's start with our level 0 students, who are our youngest usually. These are the students who are between the ages of 4 and 5, or sometimes 6-year-olds. You might even have some 3-year-olds that fit into this category. Now, it's important to know that these students have a short attention span, as I'm sure you're aware. I saw someone mention that having 5 4-year-old students in a row can be very energy draining. I don't disagree. These students need to have a lot of different activities. It's important to prepare small games that don't use props and don't use any preparation. That way, when you see the student's attention starting to drift, you can quickly shift to one of these games and bring them back. These young learners also get tired very quickly. And for this reason, it's important to take breaks for physical exercise. You can do simple games like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, or touch your nose. Simon says, can you swim? Now, it doesn't matter what activity you choose. The importance here is that you are also involved as much as the student. If you are actively participating, the student will also want to actively participate in your activities. Nobody wants to see a teacher who's just looking bored and expecting the student to do things for them. Make sure that you are doing the activities right along with your student and having fun doing them. It's also important to have props for younger children or puppets for role play. Some of my favorite props include my microphone. When I'm talking, I hold the microphone to myself. But when I want the student to talk, I'll give them the microphone. It's similar to the listen and speak, but it's a little more interesting and a little more interactive. You can make your own microphone at home. You don't have to spend a lot of money to make these props. Another prop I really like is my dice. Now, if I'm drilling a new vocabulary word for younger students, I'll throw my dice and have the number of times that we need to repeat the word on the dice. The student doesn't realize that I am controlling what number comes up, but they think it's a fun game to see what number they're going to have to do. And it keeps them engaged and want to participate. Elena and I are going to show you an activity that you can do with your youngest students. Now, usually in level 0 and in level 1, there's a slide that looks similar to this. This is a slide that is designated as a brain break for your student. Although you can usually see it at the end of your lessons, you can bring this slide in whenever you need to bring the student back and give them that break to have fun. If this is the first time my student has seen this slide, first, I'm going to show them what to do. Look, listen, cover your eyes, clap, clap, clap. Perhaps your student will start to mimic you because remember, 4 and 5-year-olds like to listen and do. Maybe they don't. That's okay. The second time through, I'm going to encourage my student to join me. Elena, look.
Ready. Look.
Listen.
Listen.
Oh, cover your eyes.
Cover your eyes.
Clap, clap, clap.
Clap, clap, clap.
Now, depending on my student and how they've just performed doing it with me, I might ask them to do it alone, or we might do it again together. If I want them to do it alone, maybe I'll say, Elena, your turn. I will still do the actions to help prompt her.
Look. Listen. Cover your eyes. Clap, clap, clap.
Great job, Elena. Now, let's say, for example, your student forgets the words, or they say, cover eyes instead of cover your eyes. Don't worry. Again, this slide is to have fun. We're not going to correct everything because that's not the objective of the lesson. We want them to be active while having fun and learning some basic classroom commands. Now, Elena performed really well. So I'm going to ask her, Elena, faster?
Look, listen, cover eyes. Clap, clap, clap.
Great job, Elena. You get a star.
Yay.
Don't forget to reward your students for doing a great job. All right, let's look at some adaptations for older students. Now, these students might be 8 or 9 or 10 or even older. Now, remember, at this age, they want to be able to talk about their world and their interests. It's very important to use age-appropriate praising and props. These students are not going to like you wearing your big Minnie Mouse ears or your big glasses. Maybe some will, but in general, they're going to find this childish, and it's going to decrease their motivation. It's important to use an appropriate tone with these students and to not use childish intonations or a lot of cheering. They might still be excited about the stars, but try to be more natural with when you give it to them. It's also important to incorporate their students' interests into their lessons. Here you can see an example slide from one of our level 2 lessons. Now, I already know that Elena, my student, loves superheroes because I learned this at a previous lesson. Show genuine interest in your students' lives. Find out about their family, find out about their interests, and write it down. I'm sure there is a place where you have a little note about each of your regular students, their birthdays, who's in their family, what they like to eat, because these are questions you've asked them already leading up to this. Take that information and use it in your lessons. It'll show that you listened, it'll show that you have a genuine interest, and they'll think, wow, my teacher really cares about me. So Elena and I have just completed this lesson and this slide talking about animals. This slide occurs later on in the lesson when it's more of a controlled practice and leaning towards a free practice. So let's adapt it. Now you can take your pen and erase all the words for the animals and the vocabulary. Or you can circle the main parts they want to use. These are both great ways to scaffold what you want them to do. Now, I know Elena likes superheroes, so I'm going to ask Elena. Elena, who is bigger, Hulk or Batman?
Hulk, bigger.
Great job. Very close, Elena. Can you make a sentence?
Hulk is bigger than Batman.
Very good. Now, maybe I'll ask her to do another one. Who is slower, Hulk or the Flash?
Hulk
Good.
is slower than the Flash.
Excellent work. Now, if I see my student is able to expand on the topic, maybe I'll ask additional questions. What color is Hulk?
Hulk is green.
Oh, fantastic. Is Hulk big or small?
He is very big.
Great job. Is Hulk good or bad?
He is great.
Oh, fantastic. Again, make sure you motivate your student by rewarding them for speaking in full sentences along with using the target grammar. All right, let's look. Now, at Novakid, we have a bunch of different levels and courses. We've just completed talking about different ages and what we find the most difficult to teach. Now, let's take another poll about the different levels at Novakid. Which level do you find the most difficult to teach your students? You should see the poll in YouTube. Now, as you're completing the poll, it's important to remember that in order to progress through the different levels and courses at Novakid, a student or a child must acquire the necessary grammar and vocabulary topics of the previous levels. For example, a student in level 3 should be able to use some personal pronouns like can and can't. These are important. When they get to become older students, they should be confident readers, whereas your lower level students will be learning to read. Which do you find most difficult?
Let's wait a couple more seconds.
And again, as the learning content increases throughout the levels, also the presentation changes. How we present material to level 0 and level 1 students is going to be very different than what you expect a level 3 or level 4 student to do during class. It is your job as the teacher to find the balance between these two. Don't worry about copying all of the information on this chart. You'll be provided a copy of this as well as the caterpillar in your handout at the end of the webinar.
Yeah, and we have the results of the poll. So 35% for level 0 to 1 and 35% for level 4 and CLIL lessons.
Okay.
Then 21% for time to talk and virtual explorer.
Okay.
And level 2 and 3, only 7% find it challenging.
Oh, that's very interesting. Now, I do agree. Teaching level 0 and level 1 can be very challenging, especially if you have a student who's a complete beginner. Sometimes the concepts are very difficult for them, especially if the grammar concepts are very different to what they're used to in their native language. At the same time, I definitely agree with what Wendy is saying about the virtual explorer lessons. Now, I have taught, at this point, I feel like I have taught almost all of the virtual explorer lessons. The last one I taught was on music, which I believe is near the end of the course. Now, the virtual explorer lessons have a lot of vocabulary and a lot of information. And sometimes, even myself, I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce this word. For example, what is the capital of Iceland? Or no, it is not the capital. It is where the waterfalls are. And luckily, Novakid has put a phonetic pronunciation in the top. But even looking at that, I have to say it in my head a bunch of times before it comes out of my mouth. Or I recently taught a lesson on the Philippines. And the Philippines is an archipelago. Now, perhaps this word is not difficult for you, but even as a native speaker, certain words in English are really difficult to pronounce. When I know that a word like this is going to come up, I Google it first, I listen to it about 10 times, and I make a little rap in my head. But what happens if you get a word that you genuinely just have no idea? Don't worry. The student is going to look to you, and it's okay to tell them that you're not sure, because chances are it's not a word that they're going to experience on a daily basis in their life. Of course, you can tell them, I'm not sure, but then in feedback, you can write it out for them, either phonetically or how you would say it. And this will help bridge the gap between words that maybe you don't know and words that they don't know, and the best way to move forward. Let's look. Are there any other comments? Okay.
None for now.
Okay, what do you think? Should we wait a moment?
I think we can carry on.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So guys, if you still, sorry, Brittany, for interrupting you. If you still have questions, don't worry, feel free to put them in the chat. We will follow up on those that we don't answer right now. We will follow up on them in the end of the session.
Exactly, don't worry. I understand that there's a delay, but we will catch up at the very end once we have time to go back and look at the questions. So now that we've looked at the level and courses, let's talk very quickly about the speaking course as well. So whereas the blue courses, the level 0 to level 4, progress naturally, it is possible that your student will take the time to talk or the virtual explorer lessons in the middle. They could take it alongside their level 3 or their level 4. These are the speaking courses that we referred to at the beginning. They are focused more on fluency with a little bit of grammar mixed in. Now let's look at how we would adapt to the student's level and pace. We've already talked about their age. Now let's focus on their level. At Novakid, you're going to find different types of learners. You'll have bilingual learners. You'll have complete beginners. You'll have weaker and stronger students. You'll have slow thinkers and fast finishers. Now, it's important to remember that these types of learners are not black and white. Your students will fall somewhere on the spectrum. And how you adapt to their abilities will depend on what they show you during class. We will look at a couple different scenarios, including students who have a command of English that is above the allocated level, and students whose abilities and comprehension might be a little bit below the allocated level. They might be shy. They might need additional support. But remember, it is up to you as the teacher to find the balance between their level and the lesson objectives. Let's start with adaptations for level 0. At level 0, your students will either be complete beginners, bilingual students, or somewhere in between. Now, if you have complete beginners, these students might not have any English exposure at home. Perhaps their parents don't speak English. Perhaps they've never seen an English TV show. Don't worry. With these students, it's important to have minimal verbal instructions. Use lots of drilling, like with the dice I showed you earlier, as well as maximum TPR and props, like your star or your microphone. Now, when it comes to bilingual children or children who have some English exposure already, maybe their parent speaks English, maybe they watch Peppa Pig in English. They might have advanced speaking skills. For these students, you want to maximize their output without drilling the vocabulary. These students are not going to appreciate saying sweater 5 times when they already know the word sweater. Make sure, like your complete beginners, that you keep your instructions short and clear. Now, it's very important to remember that regardless of if your student is a complete beginner or a bilingual student, we do not underline the text. There's no reading in level 0. A student is not expected to read, and they won't even start learning to read until level 1. Let's look at an example of an adaptation at level 0. Now, this is a slide that you might see a lot in your level 0 classes. There's usually a slide in each unit that has a picture of all of the different vocabulary words on it. Now, this one comes from Unit 12 on clothes, but even in Unit 4 on fruit, you will have a slide similar to this. Now, these slides are usually listen and circle slides, which is great. It helps the student listen and do. But what if your student has already done this slide in a previous lesson? What if your student is more advanced? What can you do to adapt? One thing that I really like to do is to number my different pictures. If I number it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then I'm going to play a game with my spinner. If you only have 5 pictures, you can always draw a little star in the bottom corner and write the additional number. This gives your student something to look forward to, something they're going to want to do. They're going to want that 6. And if they have to say all of the vocabulary words before getting there, they will. Because at this level, the students are motivated to get all of their rewards. Now, let's say, for example, I ask my student, Elena, to push the button, and she does. And it spins, it spins, it spins, and it comes up number 1. Number 1 is a dress. If Elena is a lower level student, I might just circle and listen and expect for her to produce something.
Dress.
Excellent, Elena. Now, if she doesn't, I could say sweater or dress. Giving her options helps scaffold to her level. And it also provides a little clue for her to remember what the vocabulary is. Now, if Elena is not a complete beginner, if Elena has some knowledge and I'm able to give her additional questions, I might ask her, is it a hat?
No, it isn't.
Oh, fantastic. What is it?
It's dress.
Oh, very close, Elena. Elena, it's dress?
It's a dress.
Fantastic. Now, it's important to know what the lesson objectives are for each unit. If I'm only focusing on the student's fluency, I might not correct but because this is something we had been drilling, it's a dress. I'm going to correct that. Now, Elena, do you like dresses?
No, I don't.
Oh, fantastic. Elena, have you got a red dress?
No, I haven't.
Oh, very good. You can see how far you can take these external or extended questions with your student to see what they are capable of. Now, if you have a student who is very, very high, you could ask them even to ask you questions. You could ask them, circle, ask me. This is something I like to start incorporating in the lower units so that by the time we get to level 12 or unit 12, they know my expectations. They know that it's going to be your turn to be the teacher, and they really look forward to that. Even sometimes, if I know the student can handle it, I ask them to circle the object, and I will purposely give them the wrong answer because I want to see what they're going to do. Are they going to realize at this point that the word is not correct? And most of them can. And they think it's hilarious that the teacher is wrong. Let's continue and look at some adaptations for level 1. Now, at this level, again, you might have complete beginners, or you might have bilingual kids with advanced speaking skills. At this stage, it's important to follow the same characteristics of level 1 or level 0. Minimal verbal instructions, lots of drilling, maximum TPR, and props. Or if your student is bilingual, maximize the student's output, no pointless drilling, and short and clear verbal instructions. It's important, again, to remember that at level 1, students are only learning to read. So we're not going to underline the text, and we're not going to make our students read. Let's look at a case study of a student who is very typical, not very typical, but could happen in your classes. This is Jasper. Jasper is 10 years old. He is in level 1, unit 2. The topic is body parts. his vocabulary is quite good, but he's in level 1 because he has difficulty with letter recognition and with blending. He's in the right level. The problem is you notice that his motivation is low and realize it might be because he's much older than the typical level 1 student. And for him, the material is not easy. Taking into account the characteristics that we learned earlier about 10-year-old students, how would you increase his motivation while still completing the lesson objectives? Type your ideas in the chat and we'll expand on some of them together.
We'll be happy to see your ideas, guys. Also, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you, guys, for being so active in the chat. I think we're going to have a bunch of questions by the end of the session.
Yes, that's good though.
Okay.
Okay, so remember, I'm going to help you review a 10-year-old student. Now, 10-year-old students are interested in the world, right? They have constantly changing interests and they're super competitive. So how can you take in that knowledge of a 10-year-old student and incorporate it into the lesson objectives on body parts? Here's an idea that I like to use. Usually, if we're studying body parts, we might be studying the facial features or the whole body. In level 1, unit 2, it is on the face. So Jasper and I are going to have a competition. I'm going to take the blank slide and divide it in half. And on my side, I'm going to draw a super silly face. And on his side, he's going to draw a super silly face. We'll have a competition to see whose face can be sillier or whose face can be funnier. And I will set a time limit. And at the end, we will describe our faces. I will go first to model what I want the student to do. For example, there is 1 blue mouth. There are 5 green noses. Then it will be Jasper's turn. And of course, at the end, Jasper is going to win because he is the student and we're trying to encourage them and motivate them to want to come to class. Another idea you could use is to have Jasper speak and I will draw, or I will speak and he will draw. And we're working together to practice the lesson objectives, while personalizing it to what he wants to do, but still practicing the necessary grammar. All right, do we have any comments?
Sorry, I was muted again. Yeah, we have a few comments. So Ezra suggests to make it a competition, which is exactly what Brittany has just suggested as well. A really good idea. Lauren says, act out the word and the child has to guess it.
Ooh,
have the child
fantastic.
answer if he likes something of the vocabulary, if he has, like, or don't like something, which is also very important, again, for you to build that connection with the student and find out about their interests. And that will eventually help you to incorporate that into the lesson and raise their motivation.
Absolutely.
Lot says, knowing that most of them like football, I pretend playing football and ask him what parts are moving.
Ooh, that's cool.
Interesting. Lauren, it's okay, Lauren. Yeah, no worries. It's still a good idea.
Okay. Oh, those are all excellent ideas. And I'm sure you will have more ideas as you keep thinking about it. And we can talk about more of them at the end in our question and answer as well. Okay, let's look now and move away from our level 0 and level 1 to levels 2 and 3. Now, at levels 2 and 3, you're not going to have complete beginners. Instead, you might have students who are weaker or stronger, or students who are slow thinkers or fast finishers. And the way that you adapt to these students is a little bit different. With weaker students, you want to simplify instructions. It's very important that you remember to give instructions as commands, not as questions. For example, circle sweater is very different than, can you circle sweater? The first is a command and it tells the student what they should do. It is very simple and it's very clear. They know circle. However, when they hear a question, for example, can you circle sweater? They are associating with your intonation with a rising tone for a question instead of as a command. So especially with weaker students, it's important to give your instructions as commands versus questions. With your stronger students, you can add more words into your instructions, but we want to adapt to both types of students. It's important to scaffold the material and to model what you want them to do. With your weaker students, you can scaffold in many ways. You can scaffold by pre-teaching the vocabulary. You can provide a sentence frame, or you can use flashcards. Novakid provides flashcards for every unit and every level in the portal. You can print them off and you can have them available. I have a box that has all of my levels and vocabulary, and then I label the top with the subject. So then I can use these for additional flashcard games throughout the lessons, but it also really helps for scaffolding. Now, one of the great things about Novakid is most slides have a model at the bottom. It's already there for you. If you want to use that model to help scaffold, you can cross out the words that you don't need. And that will encourage the student to make their own sentences using that model. Now, with stronger students, you want to maximize their speaking time. You can ask CCQs or follow-up questions. An easy topic to talk about is food. Everybody loves food. Everybody needs food. And it's a great way to bring in other learned food vocabulary or additional questions. In level 2, they talk about likes and dislikes. They also talk about how much and how many. In level 3, you're talking more about quantifiers. But you can also bring in other concepts they've learned, such as can you cook? What do you like cooking? Or how often, because they've also learned their adverbs of frequency. There are a lot of different grammar topics that you can bring in when you're using follow-up questions. This is where the chart that will be provided in your handout is really helpful for you to see what the prior knowledge of the student is, as well as the prior knowledge guide. Novakid really provides you with everything possible that you could need to adapt to the different levels based on what they've already learned. Let's look at a typical slide. This is in level 2, unit 4, but it's also part of the trial. Now, if a student is overperforming at this slide, you can ask different questions. For example, are you happy? Or what about yesterday? In the chat, what questions would you ask? Now remember, keep your questions relevant and within the student knowledge. It's not necessary to ask, were you angry yesterday when your dad took away your computer game? These questions are too complicated for a level 2 student. Try to remember to keep your questions simple, but also extend and expand and adapt to your student. I'll give you a moment now to type your answers in the chat. Elena, what questions would you ask?
Well, I would ask them about their pet, perhaps. Something like, is your dog happy?
Oh, Ooh, okay.
Or a family member.
Oh, good. And then you can see if that they're able to expand and talk about the third person, because this is something that a lot of students do struggle with. That third person S sound can be very difficult for some students. These are my favorite props. If you couldn't tell, the S sound. And
they come in handy when you need
no
them.
S. Oh, yes, very handy. And these are great. And they're probably my most used prop, are these simple grammar reminders. Because again, we want our students to somehow self-correct. And we will talk about self-correction and other adaptations like that in future webinars. But you want the student to increase their talking time, therefore minimizing yours. So how do you do that? You give them the keys that they need to succeed. And after a couple times, they'll notice, I need to change something.
It's a great way.
I like this comment. Eliciting different emotions using photos. Oh, that's great. I'm sure a lot of you have family photos that you use in your different units on family. You could show those. My students love seeing photos of my family. And, oh, is your mom happy now? That's also a good question. Oh.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Except if they're sitting next to you and you're like, I also sometimes I'll ask, is mom happy? And I'll have the student ask them, if the student is capable, ask your mom, Mom, are you happy? And that also helps you incorporate the student's family, because the more you put yourself into your students' lives, the more likely they're going to want to come back to your class and rebook your class again. The relationships that you form with these students are amazing and fantastic. All right, let's look at another case study. Now, this case study is perhaps more difficult than the last one. This is Igor. Igor is 6 years old in level 2, unit 8 on food. He's very advanced. He started at level 1, but because he takes multiple classes a week, he's now almost at the end of level 2. He has excellent reading, and his pronunciation needs minor adjustments. And he's able to complete most activities independently. He sounds like the perfect level 2 student. The only issue is that because he's so young, he often loses focus after 17 to 20 minutes. This leaves 5 to 8 minutes at the end of the class where, how do you complete the rest of the lesson? Taking into account the characteristics of a 6-year-old that we talked about earlier, how can you increase his focus in order to complete the lesson objectives? Write your ideas in the chat. Now, I'm going to help you remember what some of the characteristics are, because I'm sure that we've given you a lot of information. So remember, 6 and 7-year-olds and even some less mature 6-year-olds love role-playing games. They also have this magical thinking. So what can you do? Again, these are the students that need a lot of brain breaks. Luckily for us teachers, Novakid incorporates a bunch of different activities for brain breaks and fast finishers after the goodbye slide. Go to those slides when you need them. It's important to still provide those brain breaks while completing the lesson objectives. The material in level 2 might be a little bit dry, or it might be a little bit difficult for a 6-year-old who's used to more childish things. You can do some different activities. Some of my favorite activities are Pictionary. Draw the food. Let them draw the food and you guess what it is. And then make a sentence about the food using the lesson objectives and the grammar. You can also play a miming game. Elena, what am I eating?
Porridge? I'm not sure.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Here's the thing. It wasn't porridge. It doesn't matter. If porridge was a word that we're learning and the student guessed porridge, it's now porridge. So
It took me a minute.
it was actually pasta, but that's fine.
Okay, got it.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't, or if it's maybe easier.
A banana.
A banana. Okay, I'm sorry. I gave you a difficult one starting.
Remember, I'm Igor. I'm only 6.
Okay, Igor doesn't like pasta. Okay. Or you could play a simple game of tic-tac-toe or noughts and crosses.
Yeah.
Any slide can be a tic-tac-toe game because tic-tac-toe is just a very small game you can play in the corner. The student makes a correct sentence, they get to put a knot or a cross. You make a correct sentence, you get to put a knot or a cross. I cannot tell you how many times I've lost at tic-tac-toe with my students at Novakid without trying. I'm probably the worst tic-tac-toe player there ever was. But again, it is important to try and let your students win.
That is true. And we have some more wonderful ideas from our teachers. I'd have a short break to move a bit and to review actions too, then get back to the lesson. I think it's a
awesome.
Great way to do some physical exercise or maybe play. Simon says, use brain breaks throughout before he gets bored. That is also a good point. Mm-hmm. It's nice when you can actually make sure that you don't get to a point where the student loses focus. Use movements and get him more actively involved. Use different voices. Using props, movements, or play, a quick game. Basically, you want to get his attention again. That is true. Ask him how many apples he can eat for lunch.
Oh, that's
Likewise,
great.
Ask how much pasta he can eat. The boys love to exaggerate. Get him to draw his plate for food and then talk about how much, how many. That's a great idea, Lauren.
They're all very good ideas. Oh, I love that you guys are very active in asking. Okay, let's continue because I think we're running out of time a little bit. We'll go to our highest level students now. Again, here, you're not going to have complete beginners and bilingual students. You are more likely to have weaker students and stronger students. Now, with these weaker students, again, you want to simplify the content, scaffold, and focus on accuracy. Make sure you see what the objectives are for your slide. If your objective is accuracy of vocabulary and grammar, make sure that's what you're correcting. If your slide is about fluency, it's okay if students make some mistakes because we want to build their confidence to speak more. With your stronger students, you want to expand on the material and incorporate their personal interests in order to maximize student talking time. You want to make sure that no matter the class, you are speaking less than your student. At a minimum, you and your student will speak about the same in level 0. But at this level, you want to be looking for a more 70-30 teacher talking time and student talking time, with the student talking much more than you. Now, I do want to touch on one point in the Virtual Explorer that I've heard is a struggle for a lot of teachers. There is a lot of information in the Virtual Explorer courses. There's a lot of reading. It's very difficult to get through the material while also speaking. Because Virtual Explorer students are our highest level, they're more B1 level students or higher. I like to teach them additional skills that they'll need to know for their exams. One of these skills is skimming and scanning. Yes, I do make my student read a lot of the texts, but sometimes they're tired, and I notice they're tired. Sometimes I'll read the text for them. Sometimes I'll say, we're not going to read. You have 10 or 15 seconds to read silently, and then we'll discuss the questions. In my feedback, I'm going to tell the student, or the parent rather, why I did this. Skimming and scanning is a very important skill that students need to learn. It's something that's key to their exams later in life. So it also helps you get through the material in the Virtual Explorer classes while still maximizing their student talking time. Of course, don't do this with every reading passage, and make sure the student is still reading and practicing their fluency and their pronunciation. But it's just a little tip that you can do to help you get through these lessons, which sometimes can seem impossible to finish in 25 minutes. All right, I think we're now ready for our questions and answers, which I'm sure there are a lot of questions. So,
well, there are quite a few, but I just want to thank you, Brittany, for your perspective as well on the Virtual Explorer classes. And we are going to feature a few questions here. I've got the list from the questions you asked earlier, guys. The first one was, has anyone got a good TPR gesture for spell the word? I say spell and then underline the first letter and say the letter name. It works, but my TPR almost looks like I'm writing a lot of full stops.
oh, I think when I want a student to spell, I hold up my hand like it's the paper, and then I do the full stop and I spell. Maybe the first one I'll model. So I'll say spell shirt, SHIRT. And then I'll have them do it. So while you're TPRing, sometimes you also need to add in an example and model what you want the student to do.
True. And someone else mentioned you could use a bunch of flashcards with letters to illustrate what you're expecting from the student.
Oh, that's a very good idea too.
Mm-hmm. Another question was on any creative ideas how to make the grammar drills more interesting? That's a fun one.
So again, I'm going to assume that we're talking about grammar drills for the younger ones, because with the older ones, we've talked about adapting to the students' needs and interests. And I find that drilling the grammar using that is a lot easier to do than it is with the younger ones. With the older ones, the grammar drills that are passing the ball, I always assign myself as one and the student as the other, and then we switch. So that's a way to adapt for the older levels. But the younger levels, it can be a little more, or the lower levels, it can be a little more difficult to drill the grammar when the student is, So for that, if the student needs the drilling, unfortunately, that's what needs to happen. They need to drill the vocabulary. It has been proven that through the curriculum and through research that they need to be drilled this, which at the same time, you can always, if they're getting bored with the drilling of grammar, you can add in an adjective. For example, it's a banana. It's a yellow banana. It's a big banana.
Expand
so
as
they're
you
still practicing
go.
the grammar that they need, but they're making it more exciting. You could always say, it's a blue banana. Again, it doesn't matter. At this point, the student knows the banana is yellow, but let them be creative. You can let level 0 and level 1 students incorporate the topic and the grammar to their own lives or their own ideas. And if it's crazy or silly, great. They're still using the grammar in the correct order. They're still practicing, and they get to be a little silly at the same time, which helps them remember.
These are all really great tips. Thank you, Brittany. I also want to give you guys a little spoiler. We are soon going to launch a new course on drilling techniques. So hopefully this will also give a few more ideas on how to vary them during your lessons with various age groups as well. And the next question is, how do you deal with students who do well with drills and activities, but are unable to comprehend even the simplest warm-up questions? The student is now in level 3, finished levels 0 through to level 2. From level 0 to level 2.
So I have a student like this, and I will admit sometimes it's frustrating because at this point, you have probably drilled it every single class that you've had with this student, and they're still confused. How old are you with how are you? So for that, I have a bunch of different flashcards that I like to use. So when I ask the student, how are you? I like to hold up the flashcard. It gives them an idea of what the answer should be. They don't see a birthday cake. The birthday cake is on the other one. So they know that they should answer with an emotion. Now, I don't have the vocabulary here because I'm expecting the student to have already learned that if they have gone through level 0 through to level 3. but it helps them remember, oh, how are you today is not, I'm 7. It helps them remember what their picture or what their answer should be. And once I get them to do this, in level 3, I'm going to expect them to ask me, because we're not talking about drilling anymore in level 3. I mean, some drilling is necessary sometimes, but we're talking about having a conversation. So for that, if they need the prompt, I'm going to give them the prompt. I'm going to scaffold the answer until they're ready to ask me without that. But I understand sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating, but I do use a lot of props for that. And I have about 8 different question cards that I like to use. Anything from what's your favorite animal to what's your favorite color to how often do you play football? So you could try using props. I also write in my feedback. Today we practiced these introductory questions. Please continue to practice them at home so you can feel more confident using them next class. And usually combined, the next class, the student maybe doesn't know all of them, but maybe knows at least one more question that we were working on last class. And that's a win.
These are fantastic tips. Thank you, Brittany. Okay, I hope that answered your question. Unfortunately, I cannot see who asked that question now, but I've got another one for us. How do you encourage a level 1 student who can speak but really struggles with reading, yet there are lots of sounds and reading practice in the lesson each time?
Okay, so another great thing about the Novakid curriculum is that there are extra reading practice lessons at the end of
That is true.
At the end of each unit. Well, not end of each unit, but end of each 2 units. So try to work on those sounds as much as possible throughout those 2 units and throughout the review. But when it comes to the time to test those skills, as soon as you click needs improvement, an extra reading class is automatically going to be generated. And these extra reading classes are fantastic. I taught one last Monday on the or sounds, and it really, really helped my student at the end of the class feel more confident distinguishing between these different sounds, which can be very difficult for them. So I recommend you can, fail the class, which I don't recommend doing if it's only for the reading. But when you do get to that unit review, make sure you select extra reading for your student. You can also request it in intercom if that is something that you feel the student really, really needs.
Yeah, I think you can just fail the competencies, the specific competencies that you think your student is struggling with, and then the extra practice lessons will be assigned automatically, which makes it even easier for you guys. And another question is, do you have any tips for me for a student who has discovered the chat box and is more interested in typing anything and everything in the box than focusing on my lesson? He is 6 years old.
6 years old. Oh, now I like to find what the motivation is for that. Is it because they can't tell you in English, or is it because they just want to write in the chat box? Because the way that you deal with both of those is very different. If it is because he doesn't understand what the English is, or what that word in English is, it's important for you to be able to, you can acknowledge it, but then remind them that we don't type in the chat box, and then help them work through what the word is. You can do that through TPR or modeling, or even through props. Or if it's someone who just won't stop using it, again, I write it in my feedback. Please remind Igor that we only use the chat if there are technical difficulties, and that it is not something we use during class. Usually that solves the problem.
But if the problem persists, please make sure to contact Teacher Ops as well, because we can help you with that.
Absolutely. And everyone on Intercom is fantastic.
You're too nice, but thank you.
I really have always had great experiences. Everybody's been fantastic.
We're trying our best. The team is trying our best. We have one more comment from Lauren. Mm-hmm. I have a student who during the warm-up questions will say that she only knows how to say it in Russian. I know we're not really supposed to, but I allowed her to use the chat box today to tell me. the word, and we then used it to answer the questions. She was then able to answer the questions, and it motivated her. I never use it to explain what to do. Was I wrong?
I don't think you were wrong, but I don't think it's something that you should make a habit of doing. We all do things sometimes out of just panic.
I agree.
You have spent 5 minutes trying to explain how old are you, you've used your props, you've used everything, and at the end you just can't, you feel like you can't get through to the student. And we've all been there. I've been there. I'm sure everyone watching has been there. And although you should never use the chat box, if the student has already written in the chat box, there's nothing you can do.
Precisely.
Take that information, and like you said, it helped motivate the student. Now, I would also make a note of what they wrote in the chat box, because if they really, really wanted to tell you that today, they're probably going to want to tell you that again later. So next time, before they type in the chat box, you can ask them if that's what it is. You can anticipate, once you get to know your students, the questions that they're going to ask. That way, you can kind of show them how it's not okay to use the chat box without explicitly saying it to them.
Absolutely. Well, I think we are going to wrap up with the questions for now. Once again, Brittany, thank you so much for your elaborate answers. And I'm sure that all the teachers will appreciate that you're giving your own perspective, because you are doing the same thing. You're also teaching, and it's really nice to exchange your ideas and creative ideas as well. We are now going to wrap up, guys. You will receive